Earlier in the semester, I spoke about the effect of hypertrophy training on coordination or performance in terms of shooting the basketball. And so I wanted to expand on that topic and potentially improve what I said earlier. And I'll link the previous video below. But I recently saw an article by Bas van Horen, who's a scholar and sports scientist in the Netherlands. And he wrote an article about single joint training versus multi-joint training and its effect on performance. And so he cited a couple previous studies, one that looked at just doing a squat and a calf raise separately versus a more ballistic movement that incorporated a squat and then ending with the calf raise or the plantar flexion, and their effect on performance. And the one movement improved performance greater than separating the two movements. And the implication was that the single joint movements didn't impact the coordination of the movement. So if, for instance, if we're going to shoot a basketball, we had to take whatever depth of squat essentially is what we're doing. So you bend to a quarter squat, maybe a half squat, and then as you come up, the last thing that you're going to do before your toes leave the ground is kind of that calf raise or that plantar flexion that helps you lift off the ground in whatever manner of jump that you're going to make as you shoot, or maybe on a free throw if you don't jump, whatever. And so training that full movement together improved performance more than or better than training those separately. So a lot of times, weight room activities, you do a squat, you might do some calf raises, then maybe you do, a deadlift or a hamstring curl or some other kind of isolated movement for a different muscle group. And that's a lot of times how we train in the weight room. A lot of isolated movements, and then we expect that just by improving strength, we're going to improve performance, or by being stronger, we'll be better athletes. But this article and the studies that he cited argued that it's the coordination. So we have to combine the strength training with the coordination. That is not just developing or improving strength by itself, but developing or improving strength with coordination that will improve performance. And so if you look at, going back to free throw shooters, if you look at a lot of the poor free throw shooters that have the really muscular physiques, I don't know how they've trained, although I have seen videos of some of the players early in their careers, doing a lot of bicep curls or maybe a shoulder press, more isolated type single joint movements that may not have any effect on improving performance because of their single joint nature, and maybe could have that negative effect on performance by building that hypertrophy and reducing the coordination within the entire system. Again, it doesn't mean that lifting weights is wrong or incorrect, and certainly some players, especially post players, probably need to have a little bit more muscle mass. Younger players, really skinny teenagers, probably need to add on some weight to their frame. But the goal should be to incorporate that strength training with some form of coordination so that it doesn't affect shooting. I know when I was young, there was always the kind of old wives' tale that lifting weights would negatively affect your shot, and so a lot of players would stay away from lifting weights. And so I think, like all wives' tales, there's a segment of that has some truth that, potentially how we lift weights could have negatively affect shooting. Getting too muscular without that integration of the coordination potentially could have a negative effect on shooting. But simply lifting weights, and especially lifting weights in a way that we incorporate coordination, replicate the movements, that's likely why a lot of Olympic lifts tend to have good transfer, and I'll link a video below. I think I talked about Olympic lifts and their effect on shooting previously, because there is that same type of full body coordination in an Olympic lift moving that you see when you're shooting a basketball. So there could be greater transfer from doing an Olympic lift and developing strength and power and muscle mass through Olympic lifting, as opposed to doing isolated type exercises. So again, just to expand on the idea that it's not just the hypertrophy, it's not just lifting weights that can have a negative effect on performance, or in this case shooting, but it's the need to integrate coordination with strength training and not isolate the strength training with single joint exercises.